Hey folks, this is Kelani with patch 8.1 containing a whole bunch of new content and very welcome changes to various systems like Azeroth armor. It looks like it's going to be just what the game needs right now, but as with all patches that are dangled in front of our face, I can't help but wonder, when will this patch be released? Surely the sooner the better, with how many players are looking forward to the new vendors heading our way, not to mention the new heritage armor for dwarves and blood elves, a whole new chunk of story which continues the war campaign, and will eventually be walking into a new raid as well. But getting a patch too early might not be perfectly ideal either. We don't want any more bugs floating around, so it's a balancing act. It's got to be finished for the most part, but we also want to get our hands on it. While we're waiting on this patch to drop, or at least for a confirmation on the release date, let's have a look at what we can piece together to make a solid guesstimation on when we might see patch 8.1 hit live servers. So the first thing I'm going to bring up is something anyone who is playing all throughout Legion is probably familiar with, the 77-day rule. It's not really a rule, and apparently it wasn't really intended either, but the majority of patches in Legion were spread out by exactly 77 days, or 11 weeks. I guess that's just a really good time frame to get new content onto the PTR, get it tested thoroughly, and for us to work our way through the content we already have access to, right in time for another patch to drop. In Legion, patches were usually separated into more story content with the larger patches, and then raid releases with the smaller patches. Either way, they were 77 days apart until the last few patches, which threw off the counter by just a little bit. As a quick note, the very first patch of Legion, which would be patch 7.1, was delivered quite a bit earlier than the other patches at just 56 days. So if we kept to that same pace, we would have actually already seen patch 8.1 by now. Just something to keep in mind if you think it's still too early for 8.1. So 77 days from BFA's launch would bring us to October 30th, which is right on our doorstep at this point. That's our first potential date, and obviously at this point it's the earliest the patch could drop. I'm not too sure about this date. It's definitely possible, but I would have thought we would have gotten a bit more of a heads up for this patch. But then again, maybe patch 8.1 really isn't what the dev team is focusing on right now. Blizzcon is next weekend, which means we'll have a much better picture of where the World of Warcraft is right now and where it should be in a few months' time. There was a little tweet a few weeks ago which said something along the lines of patch 8.1 won't really be discussed at BlizzCon, which makes me think they're quite a bit further along than we might have thought. Not only do they have patch 8.1 more or less done, but they're already looking at what's coming after that. If patch 8.1 isn't going to be the highlight of World of Warcraft at BlizzCon, then they probably want to get it out of the way before talking about what's coming next. The only date left to get patch 8.1 out of the way is October 30th, which lines up with our 77 days. The other possibility is starting the WoW panels by talking about patch 8.1, announcing the release date right at the start, and then continuing on from there. If that's the case, being able to say, and it's going live this week, is pretty awesome. That could put our patch 8.1 release date on November 6th, which gives them a little more time to polish things up, and it gives us another week to work with some of the recent changes on the PTR like Shadow Priests. This is all assuming that patch 8.1 won't be the focus at BlizzCon and they have something else to show us, which honestly I really hope they do, because we kind of already know everything that's going down in 8.1 except for the Crucible of Storms bit. Just going over all of this information again at BlizzCon on the WoW panels would be pretty disappointing. But November 6th does come with some other issues. Patch 8.1 will bring the second warfront into the game, and we know from one of the recent Q&As that the Alliance will start attacking this new warfront right away. No contributions required, straight into the battle for Darkshore. We also know that the dev team plans to have these warfronts rotating, so while the Alliance are attacking one warfront, the Horde should be attacking the other. While the Horde have contributions to one warfront, the Alliance should have contributions to the other. Obviously, this will get a little off balance eventually with the varying lengths of the contribution cycle versus the attacking cycle, but from this information it makes sense to assume that the patch will go live while the Horde are attacking Arathi Highlands. That way the warfronts are directly opposite each other, so everyone has something to do at any given time relating to the warfronts. Well, the Horde are attacking Arathi Highlands right now, which is sort of awkward. We have 6 days left on this current attacking cycle, and then the Alliance will be contributing. And then the Alliance will start attacking on November 7th or around about there. That means the patch could go live on October 30th and be more or less fine with the cycles because the Horde will be attacking Arathi for another 4 days. That sort of lines up, but if the patch goes live on November 6th with the Alliance attacking Darkshore right away, they'll be attacking both warfronts at the same time, which from what I understand is the opposite of what Ian said would happen, because those cycles then wouldn't really split apart. So if the warfronts have any amount of swing in deciding when this patch will go live, October 30th 30th actually becomes more likely and November 6th becomes less likely. You can go a little bit past those dates, but the Horde won't be attacking Arathi again until around November 19th, giving us a possible release date of November 20th. I think that might be a bit too far away. So I guess the real question to ask and answer here is, what does the PTR look like right now? Are the features well implemented, mostly bug-free and working as intended? I would say for the most part, they are. I haven't had any troubles playing around with the new content like the War Campaign, new Heritage Armor quests, or storyline quests. It seems like everything is more or less done. The only thing that throws me for a loop right now is the class balancing changes and the large changes to Shadow Priest. I would have thought we would get a bit more time to play around with this kind of thing, but that's assuming the dev team really cares about feedback on balancing changes. Their internal projects and clients are probably several builds ahead of us at any given time, so they might already be satisfied with how everything looks on their end. If that's the case, an October 30th release date isn't out of this world. Some of you may be thinking about the raid testing and how we haven't really been able to test everything on every difficulty at this point, and you're right. The raid testing probably won't be fully finished by the time either of these closer release dates comes around. October 30th because it's right around the corner, and November 6th because I guarantee this coming week will be all about BlizzCon preparation, and then it's all about BlizzCon after that. But the Battle of Desert Lore might not be releasing with patch 8.1. Sure, a good chunk of it will be in the game files. We'll be able to see the loot that drops, the boss models, all that jazz, but most raids during Legion didn't release with the patch that actually introduced them. The only exception was Trial of Valor, which was during patch 7.1, which could mean this raid is also an exception, but I feel like this raid releasing with the patch would probably be the largest reason the patch gets pushed back a little further. TOV also wasn't a large raid, it was a 3-boss raid, so I wouldn't be surprised if we had to wait until patch 8.1.5 to get stuck into this new raid on offer. Of course, the dev team could have different plans for handling BFA when compared to Legion, but it doesn't hurt to look back and see how Legion progressed, especially when they've said several times they will want to try and keep a content cycle like Legion because it works so well. Personally, I don't think the raid will affect the release of patch 8.1, and we'll see it released a little bit after 8.1 goes live. So one other thing we can have a look at is the PTR cycles during Legion, because once again the dev team says that they want to try and match the content pace. If that's true, the 77-day rule could become a thing again, but let's stick to the PTR cycles for now. We had quite a few patches in Legion, and every large chunk that was added onto the game consisted of a 0.0 patch and a 0.5 patch. So we had 7.1.0, then 7.1.5, 7.2.0, then 7.2.5, etc, etc. Each of these patches went up onto the PTR for testing, as you might expect, and the length of their PTR testing periods was actually pretty similar. The only major outlier is patch 7.1, which went up onto the PTR just a few weeks into Legion's launch and was released very shortly after. That patch was on the PTR for 41 days, from the day it appeared on the PTR until the day it was released on live servers. Patch 7.1.5 was up there for a little bit longer at 56 days, which is more like what a typical patch seems to be. Patch 7.2 clocked in at 68 days, which is actually the longest PTR period we have in this little collection, nearly 10 weeks. I guess they really wanted to iron out the fine wrinkles in that one, because 7.25 was up for 63 days and patch 7.3 was up for 62 days, both right around the 9-week mark. Some of these dates will depend on when the PTR was announced and when it was made playable, but for the most part 8 to 10 weeks seems to be the typical window for a PTR to run its course. Patch 8.1 went onto the PTR servers on September 21st, which means if it were to release on October 30th, it would have only been on the PTR for 39 days. That's a little worrying and might be the most important factor which could throw a spanner into the works here. That's not a lot of testing time at all, and if this was to follow the longer PTR cycles of 8 to 10 weeks, we could be looking at another 3 weeks before it hits live servers. Although, that would line up quite nicely with the Horde attacking Arathi again around the 20th, so maybe that's the date they're really pushing for. With that being said, the first patch of Legion was only on the PTR for 41 days, so anything is possible at this point. I think it's really interesting looking at all of the numbers, and specifically at the most recent expansion, because it was highly praised for its consistent content cycle. If that's the pace that the dev team want to keep up with again, we should be seeing patch 8.1 pretty soon. I think October 30th is still a pretty good date, even though it seems like it's pretty unlikely at this point. The week after is kind of exciting, but comes along with a few issues when you look at some of the cycles that are ongoing in-game. If we don't see the patch on either of those two dates, I would have said November 20th would be a solid bet, until you take into account the fact that it's actually the week of Thanksgiving in America. I'm pretty sure one of the patches in Legion broke the 77-day cycle because it would have landed on Thanksgiving week as well, so the patch or raid released the next week. I doubt they would ever set a patch to go live just as most of the employees are walking out of the door for a week's holiday, so we could be waiting until after that if the patch really gets pushed back that far. My money is still on a pretty close date, either this coming week or the week after, with an announcement at BlizzCon. I just don't see it going much further than BlizzCon, especially if they don't have a lot to announce at BlizzCon relating to 8.1. If they say 8.1 is coming in a few weeks, but hey guys, we're going to talk about everything that comes after that, I don't know, that seems a little bit weird compared to 8.1's going live this week and here's what's coming after. I think that just works a lot better. I hope I'm right. I'm really itching to start working my way towards some of those Azerite armor pieces. What about you? When do you think patch 8.1 will go live? Do you think we'll see it pretty soon, or do you think it's nowhere near ready? Leave all your thoughts in the comments section below. A big thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon. You can see their names floating by on screen. If you want to join these lovely guys and gals, you can find a link in the description below. Remember to leave a like just below the video before you leave, and if you want to see more, make sure to subscribe. But apart from that, thanks for watching folks, good luck and have fun, and as always I will see you next time.